These two girls, I mean, I think I beat them both. I honestly, like, Shanika's last fight, Sugar Nick's last fight was, I mean, the fact she called me out after that fight was embarrassing. Like, that performance was terrible. Shannon O'Connell hasn't beat anyone legitimate for so long. All she does is fight all the novices in Australia and then claims to be a fucking queen. It's voluntary.
That excerpt is from my recent interview with reigning IBF bantamweight champion Ebony Bridges, who made it crystal clear
she's not doing anybody any favors.
She was very recently called out by newly crowned IBF super bantamweight champion Shernika Johnson, and upon winning the blue belt at 122 pounds, one division above where Ebony campaigns and reigns as a champion,
she called out Ebony Bridges immediately after the fight.
One of several call-outs Ebony Bridges has received since becoming the bantamweight division's IBF champion, and Ebony Bridges made it crystal clear she's not going up to 122 pounds, so there's not much sense in Shernika Johnson calling her out at this time. Shernika doesn't have anything she wants, anything she needs. It's Ebony Bridges' aim to become this division's unified and or undisputed champion. She's not going up to 122 anytime soon. She also addressed her countrywoman, Shannon O'Connell, who in the past was quoted as saying she wouldn't use Ebony Bridges as a sparring partner, much less take her seriously as an adversary.
I think those quotes are from over a year ago.
Shannon O'Connell, by way of her own social media, reacted to these quotes, calling Ebony Bridges a grub. There seems to be a growing demand in the domestic Australian market to see these two lock horns. The problem is that Ebony's not doing Shannon or anybody else any favors, it being that Shannon was among those fighters that blew her off when she was on her way up those ranks before she became a champion. Shannon O'Connell was one of the fighters that scoffed at the idea that Ebony Bridges should be taken seriously as a boxer. Here today, over a year later, Ebony Bridges stands as a champion, and Shannon is but a challenger. A challenger looking for a shot, looking for a payday, and short of a mandate from the IBF, Ebony's not going to give her one.
So I'm just going to give it to you straight.
It really is on Shannon O'Connell and her team, her promoter, No Limit Promotions, a well-to-do promotional outfit in Australia that promotes Tim Tszyu, promotes his brother, Nikita Tszyu, Shannon O'Connell, and several other Australian-based fighters. It's up to them to put the squeeze on the IBF in order to order the fight, because Shannon O'Connell is the IBF's #1 contender, but at this time, no mandate has come down forcing Ebony to give Shannon a shot, to give her the time of day. And without that, Ebony's not going to do anybody any favors because, well, nobody did her any.
There might be a growing demand in the Australian domestic market to see such a fight, but Ebony doesn't live in Australia anymore.
She very recently relocated to the United Kingdom, and she is now a UK-based Australian import. Thus, what the Aussies want to see domestically isn't any concern of hers.
Just the facts.
She's not on the eve of moving up to 122 pounds to take on Shernika Johnson, and she's not going to give Shannon a shot for the sake of giving Shannon a shot, because Shannon, well, she was particularly unkind to Ebony on her way up. Thus, short of a mandate from the IBF themselves ordering Ebony to fight Shannon, it won't happen.
Just the facts.
I'm not even telling you it's not a great fight. It's a great fight. Two pressure-based fighters, two mid-range to inside punchers that pack a punch, two of the bigger punchers in today's bantamweight division, if I'm being honest, that have a lot of bad blood between them. If you could get them both in the ring, it would be a good fight, but don't expect Ebony to do Shannon any favors. It's on Shannon now to put the squeeze on the IBF, since she's the #1 contender, to order the fight, because devoid of that, it won't go down. It won't happen.
And Ebony herself, who I've spoken to on many occasions, doesn't care about her critics and her naysayers.
Consider that even now, as she reigns as the IBF's bantamweight champion, having unseated long-reigning champion Maria Cecilia Roman, the same people that were criticizing her before she won that title are criticizing her now. There's no satisfying those people, no satisfying those individuals. It is true that Shannon O'Connell has been facing fighters, some of them unbeaten, that are not as experienced as she is, whereas Ebony Bridges, with her, it's the opposite. She took on a very experienced fighter, took on a very experienced champion, beat her, and became a champion herself.
And her critics don't want to give her any credit for it.
And it's their prerogative. If they don't want to give her any credit, they don't have to, and she, in turn, doesn't have to trip over her own feet attempting to satisfy those who will not be satisfied, won't be satisfied until she loses another fight, because that's what it's all about. The pendulum swings both ways.
Ebony Bridges was criticized by many a fight fan and many a fighter on her way up due to how she marketed herself.
Playing up her aesthetic qualities and her aesthetic value in order to bring new eyes to the sport of women's boxing, and it has worked out in the end because she is the most recognizable fighter, albeit not the most experienced, in today's bantamweight division. She has easily become the most recognizable face at 118 pounds, and it's due to how she marketed herself.
Also, that the people who were criticizing her before expect the most of her now?
Some fighters who had a lot of not so nice things to say on Ebony Bridges' way up, they shouldn't be expecting favors of her now. If JohnsonOConnell wants that title shot, she's only going to get it through the IBF because Ebony won't give it to her voluntarily.
Without condoning or condemning, that's the situation.
If you told me that tomorrow Ebony Bridges was going to take on JohnsonOConnell in a domestic clash, domestic rivalry as a boxing fan, of course I'd watch it, but I've no expectation to see it short of a mandate due to the bad blood and what happened leading up to this point. What was said.
That's just the way it is until further notice. Nothing I can do about it.
Other news per tweet from Michael Benson. Jake Paul was asked if he'd consider making the Tommy Fury fight for a third time. If it makes sense, yeah. I think it'd be funny to go over to the United Kingdom and knock him out in front of his own family. We know that Jake proposed a visit over to the United Kingdom on the premise that Tommy accept the fight for just $500,000. Tommy blew off that idea, saying he doesn't get out of bed for that kind of money.
So what's he expect us to believe? That old Fish Eyes is paying him close to $1 million for fighting those guys?
He's making over $500,000 a fight with under 10 fights against no world-class, no world-level opponents. Am I understanding this? He needs in excess of $500,000 to take on a YouTuber moonlighting as a boxer.
You turning this into a risks versus rewards situation?
It sounds like it, and it's not supposed to be because this is Jake Paul we're talking about. It's Jake Paul after all. It's not some blue-chip prospect fresh out of the Emmys.
Tommy Fumbles is making Jake Paul seem like a more legitimate boxer than he is.
Jake Paul, who posted this image with a caption that reads, "I should sue this fool." His own dad exposes why he pulled out for a second time. In the image, there's a quote from Big John that reads, "Tommy wasn't exactly in training. I told him, I know you could be fitter. You're overweight, but it's up to you because I can't do the camp. Go over there and box him." And, that's when John Fury spoke to DAZN.
But I thought the fight was off because Tommy Fury couldn't enter America.
Was unable to enter into the United States, as most are speculating that his tenuous connections with Irish cartel king Daniel Kinahan is the reason he was denied access to the United States. I mean, that's the story that most people are going with, whereas Jake seems to think that it's because Tommy didn't want the fight.
But you know what? It's not even the Kinahan stuff. The guy just doesn't want to fight Jake.
So for what reason should Tommy Fury be apprehensive about fighting Jake Paul? Well, Tommy Fury, he ain't Tyson, I'll tell you that much. He ain't Luke in terms of ability, in terms of boxing acumen. He hasn't exactly taken the world by storm in his 6 or 7 pro bouts. He really hasn't looked the part, hasn't looked like a Fury.
Could you imagine what would happen if he were to lose that fight?
Irreparable damage to his would-be boxing career, sullying the Fury name, the Fighting Furies, Big John Fury, who can never close his mouth, Tyson Fury right there along with him, and Tommy. If Tommy were to lose to a YouTuber in America, that would cause irreparable damage to the Fury name, more importantly to Tommy Fury's career. Maybe he doesn't want to run those risks, or maybe it's the way Tommy says it is. He wasn't allowed entry into the country, so the fight couldn't happen. Eddie Hearn chimed in on the whole thing. Matchroom impresario Eddie Hearn on Tommy Fury turning down Jake Paul's $500,000 offer for a UK fight. The problem Tommy has is the only fight for him that can generate any kind of money is Jake. So Tommy really needs Jake. Listen, Jake needs Tommy as well. The two of them make a good fight. But why is Tommy Fury, who doesn't even have 10 pro bouts under his belt yet, why is he looking for cash fights now? If you're a serious boxer, a serious professional with a serious boxing career, you shouldn't even be looking to cash out now.
You say a prize fighter's always looking for the biggest prize.
He won't fight a YouTuber for $500,000. I think Tommy Fury was set to make a little over $1 million, perhaps $2 for this fight.
And now because he can't enter into the United States and Jake might end up having to travel to him, assuming Rahman doesn't knock him out.
Hasim Rahman Jr., the son of Hasim Rahman, very famously knocked out Lennox Lewis. Let's assume Jake Paul makes it through Hasim Rahman Jr. through some miracle, some chance. and let's assume that he revisits the possibility of a Tommy Fury fight. In the UK, since Tommy can't come to America, Tommy won't do the fight for $500,000. We all know who the A side in this situation is. We all know that Jake Paul is the star of the show, more or less.
Think about what this is doing to the Fury name and Tommy Fury's reputation.
I mean, let's face it. The one time I saw Tommy Fury fight, I think it was last year in Cleveland, I said, wow.
Wow.
He really is the Fredo Corleone of this fighting man. So,
But he wants respect.
Right. I mean, I almost think that if you as a professional boxer are chosen by Jake Paul, it literally means you have no future in the sport. It's like, hey, Tad, you're it. Tad, you're it. You got booties.
When a YouTuber moonlighting as a boxer starts feeling comfortable enough to drag your name through the mud, your family's name,
And when it starts to affect your reputation as a serious professional, the way it's affecting Tommy's,
suddenly it's not just the fight purse you're fighting for anymore. Tommy Fury don't fight this Jake Paul character. The effect it has had on his career may be irreversible because Tommy Fury himself, he doesn't seem to have the ceiling that his brother has.
like I said, he's no blue chip prospect.
Let's say Hasim Rahman Jr. goes in there with Jake Paul on August 6th. He knocks that guy out. That doesn't change anything for Tommy because Tommy will still be the one who fumbled the fight 2 times. Tommy will still be the guy who was afforded that opportunity not once but twice, and it took Hasim Rahman to drive the circus out of town. Not Tommy. Tommy Fury fumbled the bag.
You say Tommy couldn't fight because he had a chest infection.
And a second time he couldn't fight because he wasn't allowed to enter into the country. I'm telling you right now, you try to explain this to Joe Blow on the street, and it won't take long before Joe's eyes start rolling in the back of his head.
People don't care and they don't want to hear all that shit.
To a lot of people that don't follow the sport as closely as I or you, more importantly, a lot of inconsiderate people that really don't want to hear it. They just want to see a fight. It's going to sound like what it sounds like because it looks like what it looks like. Tommy Fury shat it.
I mean, I almost think that if you as a professional boxer are chosen by Jake Paul, it literally means you have no future in the sport. It's like, hey, Tad, you're it. Tad, you're it. You got booties.
Veteran boxing scribe Steve Kim said it best. There are certain implications associated with someone like Jake Paul targeting Tommy Fury for a fight. What does it say about Tommy Fury's boxing that Jake Paul feels confident enough to offer him not 1 fight, but 2 fights 2 times? He tried to do the fight with this guy 2 times. What does it say about Tommy Fury's boxing that Jake feels confident enough that he can beat him?
And he must feel confident that he can beat him because he offered him the fight 2 times on 2 separate occasions.
Telling you, suddenly, it becomes a situation to where Tommy's fighting for more than just a fight purse. It becomes a situation to where he's fighting for respect. He's fighting for his reputation, for his namesake. Jake Paul offers him a 3rd shot. If he offers him a 3rd fight, he better take it.
More importantly, he better win.
And finally, in men's light heavyweight news, Eddie Hearn says Artur Beterbiev versus Anthony Yarde is a total mismatch. And on paper, a lot of people feel that way, that Anthony Yarde, he's a good domestic level boxer, not necessarily proven at world level.
One of his best performances is a knockout loss to Sergey Kovalev.
I think his career best performance is avenging the loss to another domestic level guy in Lyndon Arthur. Eddie Hearn said Yarde is a nice guy from London. That's a mismatch, that fight. A total mismatch. Yarde has done around 3 rounds in 18 months, or whatever, and he's a good domestic level fighter and had a good fight with Kovalev in Russia. Beterbiev, he's a different animal, Hearn told his own boxing show.
Against Artur, even world-level fighters.
Proven guys like a Joe Smith Jr., even fights like that with world-level guys can end up looking like mismatches, so a domestic-level guy like an Anthony Yarde, well...
Look, we know what this is. Bob's waiting out Dimitri's situation with Matchroom.
Bob's not necessarily operating in the best interests of his client, an aging fighter, an aging champion who's still elite in Artur Beterbiev, but if he is, and he feels it's so necessary to ship him out to London to take on Anthony Yarde in a mismatch fight,
he's likely waiting out Dimitri's situation with Matchroom.
You know, a Dimitri Bivol fight really is the biggest fight you can make for Artur Beterbiev. It's certainly a bigger fight than an Anthony Yarde fight. Anthony Yarde isn't some big ticket seller in the UK to where you could qualify this as a cash fight. It isn't. Dimitri Bivol...
That's a bigger fight for Artur than Anthony is, and we all know that.
But if Bob's choosing to do that fight as opposed to a Dimitri Bivol fight, it could very well be because he's waiting out Dimitri's situation with Matchroom. Right now, Dimitri Bivol is a Matchroom fighter.
and Bob doesn't want to have to work with Eddie Hearn on this thing. If he can wait out Dimitri's contractual situation, see what happens in Dimitri's next fight, then see what happens after that, should Canelo Alvarez choose to fight him for a second time. That's what Bob's waiting for. Bob's waiting for the smoke and the dust to settle. The story is that Eddie Hearn has made Dimitri Bivol an offer to take on his man Joshua Buatsi.
At the same time, Zurdo Ramirez maintains that he's in a pole position to challenge Dimitri Bivol next, even though the WBA hasn't actually ordered a fight between them. Zurdo Ramirez is the WBA's #1 contender at light heavyweight, but at this time, I know of no such order ordering Dimitri to fight Zurdo, so it seems that Dimitri has a bit of wiggle room. He has the luxury of choice.
And I feel like Bob Arum's waiting all that out. You know, Bob's been poo-pooing on this fight for a long time.
Even before Dimitri Bivol upset the apple cart for Canelo Alvarez, Bob Arum had no interest in making this thing, pouring cold water over it, citing that Dimitri Bivol is a bit of a boring fighter.
There were difficulties in making this fight before Dimitri beat Canelo.
There are even more difficulties now. Ideally, this fight should have and could have taken place before Dimitri beat Canelo, but now that he's beaten him and he's got more of a profile, he's gonna want more money. And lest we forget, a second Canelo Alvarez fight is a tangible possibility because Canelo says he wants to run it back with that guy. He wants to go back to light heavyweight and avenge the loss. That makes things difficult. So ideally, if you can do the undisputed fight this year, before
a Canelo Alvarez versus Dimitri Bivol rematch happens,
you might as well, because it's a bigger fight for your client than the fight you're putting him in, than the mismatch, as Eddie Hearn describes it, with Anthony Yarde. That's a formality fight if it's anything. It's a keep busy fight. It's just a way to get Artur back out there one more time before this year is out so he can keep the tools sharp.
though it's morally ambiguous because you're not operating in your client's best interests so much as your own.
If you're gonna do what's right for Artur, an aging fighter, an aging champion who's 37 going on 38 years old, you put him in that undisputed fight sooner than later because he ain't got all the time in the world.
We've already had this conversation.
And unless something changes, that's the situation.